I can't think of a movie quite like Johnny Got His Gun. Thanks to being the subject for one of the biggest songs by the biggest heavy metal band of all time, a lot of people are very aware of this film's story, but very few have actually seen it, including myself until only a few years ago, despite being very aware of the story since I was at least 9 or 10, being a big Metallica fan. And it was a story that lived rent-free in my mind. The story, its concepts, and even some of its philosophy can be insinuated from just a rudimentary 1 or 2 sentence summary. You can easily draw parallels to the Right to Die movement, led decades later with the cases of people like Carrie Ann Quinlan, Nancy Cruzan, and Terry Schiavo, when modern medicine had advanced to the point of keeping more people alive when they would have been given up as dead mere decades ago, which is a blessing but also a curse. On one hand, a lot of people have been given a second chance at life. On the other hand, it's estimated by doctors and neuroscientists that 15 to 25% of people in a comatose state are conscious and can fully perceive everything around them. And there's plenty of people who thankfully were able to wake up and tell the world exactly what happened to them. And when you think about the tens of thousands of comatose people in the US alone currently, that 15 to 25% statistic is a very scary thought, especially remember how few people even wake up. It's a much smaller statistic than the previous one, I'll leave it at that. But that hope from family and friends is what keeps people alive, arguably longer than they should have. Sure, you have a chance, but is it worth it? I've never met someone who would be okay to be left alive in a vegetative or comatose state if the odds were that against them. And in the 1971 film, Johnny Got His Gun, the odds are even greater. And there's no happy ending. Johnny Got His Gun was originally a book written by Dalton Trumbo in 1939, the same man who would direct the film over 3 decades later, and also the same man who would later be blacklisted by Hollywood for several years and even went to jail for his communist and socialist beliefs. Land of the free indeed. F you, John Wayne. MDC was right. But being the badass he was, he wrote under pseudonyms for years and won 2 Oscars from behind said blacklist. Fun fact, that's more Oscars than John Wayne ever won. Yes, I'm petty towards a dead man on behalf of another dead man, why do you ask? If you want to learn more about Trumbo's life, I'd recommend the film Trumbo, starring Bryan Cranston. There's some creative liberties, as to be expected, and it can be a bit heavy-handed, but I'd still recommend it for Bryan Cranston's performance alone. I bring up the politics because this is a very political story to its core. It's impossible to isolate it from its politics. So to those of you complaining about me, quote, making it political, I suggest you go back to listening to Rage Against the Machine in peace and ignorance. The novel was written in 1938 as another global war was bubbling under the surface, and published a mere 2 days after World War II was officially declared in 1939. Trumbo was inspired to write the story after reading an article years later about Edward VIII visiting a Canadian veterans hospital to see, not really meet, a soldier who lost all his limbs and senses. The book tells the story of Joe Bonham, a young soldier whom, after being hit by an artillery shell, loses his limbs, senses, and is presumed to be, for lack of better words, mentally dead, due to extreme damage to his cerebrum. He, however, has a perfectly working mind, leaving him a prisoner of his own body. The story drifts from his current reality to recollections of his past to his drug-induced dreams until it heads to its dark conclusion. The book was received well and even won an American Bestsellers Award, but after America officially joined World War II in 1941, Trumbo and the publishing company decided to cease prints of the book. And when it was reprinted in 1959, Trumbo said he received letters from a few American Nazis who wanted copies. He contacted the FBI about the letters, an act he later called foolish, as the agents who arrived at his home were far more interested in him than the letters he received. In 1966, Trumbo teamed up with producer Bruce Campbell, and no, not that Bruce Campbell, and after a deal with Warner Brothers fell through, Trumbo and Campbell, along with 25 other investors, got the movie funded for $750,000, but it raised to over $1 million after some issues with technical fees. The film starts with no real music, as Johnny Got His Gun does not have much of an original soundtrack. It does have one, but it's nothing special. It uses a monotonous drum roll with archival footage to put us in the mood to watch an old World War I documentary or something, which makes the events you're about to see all the more unnerving, especially when you remember that this story was inspired by a real soldier. As the credit sequence ends, we hear a bomb drop, scene explosion, and a smash cut to black, and then we hear our main character, Joe Bonham's breathing. immediately bringing you into Joe's lonely and isolating world. It only lasts for about 25 seconds, but it feels like 25 minutes as you hang on his every labored breath, before cutting to what would be his POV, if he still had his vision, of 3 military surgeons standing before him, explaining what happened to him, to each other, and to the audience.
Curious how they always double up in the fetal position.
What's curious about it? They're trying to protect their genitals.
Okay, I'm not sure about that. His misdiagnosed condition is further explained by his general, played by Edward Franz. They believe his brain cerebrum is so badly damaged that he is unable to have any senses, feel any emotion, or even really think.
It is impossible for a decerebrated individual to experience pain, pleasure, memory, dreams, or thought of any kind. It follows, therefore, that this young man will be as unfeeling, as unthinking as the dead until the day he joins them.
It's then when we as an audience are left alone in the dark with a ticking clock and an ominous drum, a drum that comes back later. And while the camera zooms in on the hospital bed with Joe's body covered with bandages for a short but devastating amount of time until we hear his first thoughts.
Corrine? Corrine? What happened? Where am I?
Joe Bonham, the man underneath those bandages, is played by Timothy Bottoms in his film debut. And I must say, for his first ever movie, he handles himself quite well. His performance isn't quite perfect, as he can come across as quite awkward in his delivery at times, especially when he's on camera in flashbacks, but that could be more due to Trumbo's directing than Bottoms himself. But his narration throughout the film is solid for the most part. It's even fantastic when he goes on philosophical tangents about life and war, and especially his rants about time is amazing.
I don't pay much attention to time anymore.
Oh, you must. All I think about is time. The way it is with me, you'll never grow old. Because I keep you right here in my mind. I'll keep you beside me young and beautiful forever. Because of all the people in the world. Only with me will you be safe from time.
And I like that his narration often will be at the same time as other actors' lines, which makes sense. He can't hear him, so it's not as if he would wait his turn to talk. One scene he's even yelling while the people in the hospital around him are having a conversation. It's really tense and uncomfortable.
You've cut off
The
my
tissues are
arm!
well opposed.
My arm!
Remove the rest.
Oh my God, why did you do
Then
a thing like
re-cleanse
that?
the
I
wound.
need that arm!
And I love how he acts even when he's strapped to the hospital bed. He can't move his arms, legs, or even face. All he can do is move his head, and you can feel every emotion he's going through, even when not speaking. His body acts different whether he's sad, happy, angry, or scared. Timothy Bottoms' performance in this movie is why I always laugh at the idea that masked characters need to have the actor's face visible in a film or TV show. If Timothy Bottoms' performance can have this much range with only head movements and his voice, then you guys have no excuse. It transitions to Joe's last night before he's shipped off, comforting his justifiably worried girlfriend, Corrine, played by Kathy Fields. You can see here how he's been conditioned to want to go to war by a blind sense of nationalism.
You could have been exempt because of your sisters.
My mother's got a job. Besides, when the country needs you, you've got to go. You should go.
And it's something Joe comes to deeply regret, as he promised her he would be okay. In fact, Corrine, as well as Joe's dad, played by Jason Robards, overshadow the story, even though we don't see very much of them. But from what we do see, we understand the impact they left on Joe. In the case of his dad, we first see him dead of an unknown illness, judging by the time period, likely pneumonia, influenza, or tuberculosis. We see the impact of his death before we see him, and when we finally do see him, within a few short scenes, we understand he's a man of very low self-worth who appreciates the few nice things he has in life, including his very nice fishing rod, which he says he likes more than his own son, on account of it being more quote-unquote distinct.
Do you love it more than you love me?
Of course I do. What is there about you that can give a man distinction? You're not unusual at all.
He also says he would gladly give his son's life for, quote, democracy, despite not even know what it is or how to describe it. And what he does say about it is extremely grim.
It's got something to do with young men killing each other, I believe.
It shows people's willingness, especially back in the day, to put their lives on the line for something they didn't even really understand very well. but when Uncle Sam called, millions of young men went running into the slaughterhouse. It shows the power and scariness in blind nationalism, when it can evoke so many to give everything when they probably couldn't even name the real reason that they were being shipped off to war in the first place. But his dad as a character is interesting because he has a bit of an arc even though he's killed off in the first scene. We see him forgiving his son for losing his prized fishing pole, and in a dream we see him give Joe the advice to use Morse code, a method that eventually lets him communicate with the outside world. I know it's a dream, so it probably shouldn't count towards his arc, but still, it's something. And Corinne is a constant reminder of what he could have had. They had only just had sex for the first time, and he felt like their relationship was only on the cusp of starting. As a character, she doesn't exactly have much going on, and Kathy Fields' performance isn't exactly amazing.
Don't let them take you, Joe. Run away. Goodbye, Joe.
Can't you tell me how long it's been?
No.
The fact that the first thing we hear Joe say is her name should tell you all you need to know about how he feels about her. The quality of Joe's care is very poor. The same general who asks for good care for him as any other person
Care for him as gently as if he knew what you were doing and would feel the pain if you did it badly.
says it doesn't matter what room he's in, since as far as he knows, he can't tell the difference, and he okays them putting him in the storeroom.
A room with a lock, something over the window so they can't peer in at him.
No arms, no
There isn't a
arms.
decent unoccupied room in the building.
Utility room, supply room, storeroom, anything. He can't tell the difference. Put someone in here who can.
He doesn't have sheets on his blankets, and the windows are always closed, until the head nurse comes in and demands them open out of pure empathy.
As long as I'm head nurse of this ward, the shutters are open and they will stay open. Let him have a little sunshine.
They said it was to keep people from peeking in at him.
It would take a man 7 feet tall to peek through that window. Oh, and another thing. I want sheets on this bed.
He's walking.
No more blankets.
He can't really tell the difference, you know.
Now he stopped.
I can.
It's the first time in the movie Joe is shown any compassion, even though she has no reason to. Joe slowly but surely learns of his condition. Remember, he was never told. Using the very few senses he has left, he can somewhat tell what's going on around him. He can tell by vibrations how many people are in the room at once, and if they do something that would make a lot of noise or vibration. He's also painfully aware of his feeding and breathing tubes. It's unsettling. But he has all the time in the world to figure out so much about his current condition because he, quote, thinks to keep himself from thinking, which is horrifying. He can also tell when the sun is out when his shutters are opened, as he can feel the warmth, which he's then able to use to tell and keep rough time, and he's able to count the days, months, and years after they've opened. He can also feel when people touch his head or torso, which one of his nurses uses when she has suspicion of him being really alive, and uses his chest to write Merry Christmas. This and him sensing sunlight are the few times he feels true happiness during the film. It's quite humbling what a simple kind gesture can do for someone. Though if Joe was hit with a bomb, I don't think he would have any skin left, let alone hair or nipples. I'm not expecting Tom Savini levels of gore or anything, but I think they could have used light makeup to good effect. Being in black and white and mostly shooting Joe in the dark means it wouldn't even have to be too detailed to be convincing. At the very least, they could have shaved his head. If he has no tongue, why does he still have hair follicles? This movie also uses color for an interesting effect. All scenes in the present are in drab black and white, all scenes that take place in the past are in color, and all dream sequences are in slightly more saturated color. Very reminiscent to something like The Wizard of Oz. But the sepia tone used in Wizard of Oz was supposed to be calm and inviting. The black and white in Johnny Got His Gun is cold and dark, both literally and metaphorically. In fact, this movie uses darkness to really great effect in a lot of scenes. What I'm not a big fan of is the fact that the dream sequences in the past don't really look that different. In the 2 times I watched this movie, I couldn't tell there was even a difference in color correction between the two. You could call me stupid for not picking up on it, and you might have a point, but I don't understand why you'd make such a vital storytelling element so hard to miss. Sure, with context, it's pretty easy to tell when it's a dream or when it's a flashback, especially since he talks to fucking Jesus at one point, and I'm gonna go out on a limb here, but I don't think Joe ever met Jesus. I just think they could have done more. It by no means ruins the film, it's just an unfortunate byproduct of likely financial issues or something. It was a relatively small budget, even for the time. But coming back to Jesus, if I could count the amount of times I've said that today, he's in a couple of scenes played by Donald Sutherland, and it's interesting how Joe has spent his whole life believing in God, only to be shooed away by him when he's told he can't really help him.
Perhaps it would be better for you to go away now. There are very Unlucky young man, and sometimes it rubs off.
Which I'm sure is saying something about the church and religion as a whole, but Trumbo, as far as I can tell, never made his religious beliefs, or lack thereof, public. But in my opinion, I don't see it as necessarily anti-religion, but it tells you that religion doesn't and can't have all the answers. Religion can help a lot of people, but just because you believe in a higher power, it doesn't mean you'll all of a sudden be happy or automatically made a good person. It also shows how supremely screwed Joe is.
Since your real life is a greater nightmare than your dreams, it would be cruel to pretend that anyone could help you.
With so much of the movie taking place in flashbacks during several points of his life, we meet a lot of people who left an impact on Joe, which unfortunately leads to some pretty distractingly bad acting from glorified extras.
Ashes to ashes. Dust to dust. Oh, they're mercy on his soul. The bloody bastards have shot me in the arse.
Is that really what I want to hear before Joe gets hit by a fucking bomb? He eventually gets a nurse played by Diane Varsi, who you can tell really cares for him. She gives him quality of care that very little others have. She shows him warm gestures like moving his bed in front of the window, giving him a rose for his bedside table, and kissing him on the forehead. She even encourages him like a child learning to walk when he's moving his head after being kissed. She shows him such compassion, even though she was told that he's basically a living piece of meat and not much else. But she still has empathy for what happened. She's showing respect like we do for our dead, and she's the one to eventually get the feeling he's actually alive, which leads to one of the darkest endings in film history. After realizing Joe is communicating in Morse code, everyone is baffled and horrified, and there's some great acting in this scene.
It's Morse code. For what? SOS. Help.
Do you mean to say that this man is actually speaking to us?
Timothy Bottom's narration is fantastic, the soldier deciphering his Morse code is so shaken up that his voice is shaking, and the main general is in awe but is still quite heartless. He accosts the general who originally gave everyone the misdiagnosis.
Decerebrated, General. Completely decerebrated.
But then again, it's not really his fault. He was probably just repeating what other doctors told him, but he still made the call to keep him alive as a glorified science experiment. You can see the pain in his eyes and the disdain from everyone else because the call he made was responsible for an innocent young man living in constant hell for a number of years. And you can tell it's been quite a bit of time since he's aged a good bit since the start of the film. Apparently the film takes place over the course of 4 years, which makes sense, and after finding this out, he goes completely silent and leaves, in utter disbelief that he's responsible for such suffering. The main general asks him what he wants, and Joe wants to be put in a traveling carnival show so people can see him in the horrors of war. The general says that such a request is probably impossible.
Let me out.
Well, what could we have expected? Tell him we'll do everything we can, but his condition won't permit him to be moved. For the present, that is. Be sure to say for the present.
Upon hearing this, Joe asks to be killed, but in an act of callousness, the general brushes off him wishing for his own death as just him being upset, as he closes and locks the shutters and says,
"These shutters are to be closed at all times."
In doing this, he's been kept away by prying eyes and is deprived from sunlight, the one thing that gave him such happiness earlier in the movie. And when the general closes the shutters, he's effectively sealing Joe's fate. He tells everyone that Joe will remain a secret and asks the military chaplain, or priest I believe, to give him some holy words of encouragement, to which the priest responds with one of the best lines in movie history, as far as I'm concerned.
You could at least tell him to put his faith in God, couldn't you?
I'll pray for him for the rest of my days. But I will not risk testing his faith against your stupidity.
Well, you're a hell of a priest, aren't you?
He's the product of your profession, not mine.
And after everyone else leaves, the nurse who watched the entire correspondence tries to kill him, but the general comes back and puts an end to that, and I think we all know how this story ends.
SOS. Help me. SOS. Help me.
God, this ending is such a punch to the gut. I'd put it up there with the ending of Requiem for a Dream. It's not as visceral, but it lingers with you much more. Ending it with the knowledge that he'll probably spend the rest of his natural life in that condition is heartbreaking. Especially when you remember that he can't be any older than 22 or 23 by this point. If he, by some random miracle, doesn't die from his injuries, which doesn't seem likely, he's got at least a few more decades left. It ends with the statistics of hundreds of millions dead, missing, or mutilated by war. And this is only by 1971. You can only imagine how bad that statistic is now. It ends with a line from Roman poet Horace, which translates to English as, "It is sweet and fitting to die for the homeland." Overall, it's a great film that I feel can be very rewarding to watch, even if you're a big Metallica fan who knows the Cliff Notes version. Though, be forewarned, it's quite a slow-moving feature. There's not exactly much action to be had when your main character has no limbs. The pacing can be a little off at times, some of the acting isn't great, and you can maybe make an argument that it's heavy-handed, but it's an anti-war film. Is there anything wrong with being anti-war? Despite the book being really popular, the film kind of came and went. It failed to make back its $1 million budget, and critical reception was generally good, but there's a lot of criticism directed towards the acting, the script, and Trumbo's direction. And strangely enough, some people said that the anti-war message seemed done to death and that the story wasn't relevant in 1971 as it was on the cusp of World War II. But we still had the Vietnam and Cold Wars to worry about in the 70s, so I don't feel that's fair. It's not as if all war stopped in 1945. As long as there is war, and there likely always will be, don't you worry, this film's message will always remain potent. But still, a lot of people enjoyed it. It won awards at Cannes Film Festival, and Roger Ebert really liked it. Gene Siskel not so much, but hey, you can't win them all. As the years passed, people just kind of forgot about this movie. After Dalton Trumbo died, a lot of people mainly remembered him for his work on Spartacus, Roman Holiday, and The Brave One. And nowadays, more people probably know him for his famous exile from Hollywood. That was until a little band, small-timers, up-and-comers, maybe you heard of them. Yeah, so by pure coincidence, Metallica frontman James Hetfield thought about the concept of being trapped within your own body. He, along with the rest of the band, were given a copy of this film because their managers were aware of it, and after watching it, they wrote their first mainstream hit, One, based on the film. The song was also the basis of their first ever music video, which included clips from the film, and it surprised everyone because they derided music videos and the concept of them for years. But they made one for, well, One. And it was nothing like any other popular rock or metal video you might find on MTV in 1989. It was dark, creepy, would scare the hell out of your grandmother, and it was 7.5 minutes. Can we appreciate that Metallica made a song like this so popular just on the basis of it being that good? No other band other than them could do that. Sure, I know there's a radio edit, and there was a shorter version of the video with no clips of the film, but I don't think they were even used very much. The band themselves certainly didn't like it.
To be totally honest with you, neither me nor any of the other guys in the band really think much of that short version.
They even played the song at the Grammys and were introduced by Billy Crystal of all people. And as you can imagine, being the basis for one of the most popular metal songs of all time helped this movie in a lot of ways in terms of popularity. The only unfortunate thing is this movie is full-blown spoiled if you've seen the video. And I'm not necessarily knocking it for that. It's a powerful video, so it works. It just unfortunately lessens someone's want in seeing the original film. In fact, the Metallica connection is so great that the band bought the rights to the film so they wouldn't have to continue paying royalties. And if you buy a copy of the film now, you'll also get the video for One as a special feature, which is pretty cool. Though looking into things, I'm not sure if Metallica, or James Hetfield I should say, really understood the film too well. Oh, I'm gonna get hate for this. First off, the line, now, I'm not sure if you noticed, James, but landmines are kind of in the ground. It's in the name, land mines. At the start of the video, you hear and see a bomb hit Joe, and landmines don't really do that. Come on, James, is your attention span that bad? Could you not think of another word that fit phonetically? Also, Lars Ulrich says in a promotional interview for the song and video,
Timothy Bottoms, obviously, as the guy himself. I'm actually not sure if he's Johnny. I haven't figured that one out. He doesn't really have a name, obviously, in the song or anything, but we presume that he's Johnny himself.
No one is technically Johnny. It's a metaphorical title. It's a play on Johnny Get Your Gun, the wartime slogan used to encourage young men to join the military. And they call him by his name several times in the film. Lars, his name is Joe. It's not hard to grasp. They say it several times, including the credits. Also, lest we forget this interview with James Hetfield in 1993 with Rolling Stone. We never labeled ourselves as an anti-war band, anti-this or pro-anything. We got called a political band around Injustice for All, and it really scared us because that's not what we want to write about forever. We've got other things to talk about. James, I can kind of understand wanting to be apolitical. I don't really agree with it, but that's besides the point. But is it so hard to say war bad? Will you refrain from saying you guys are pro-puppies too? And yeah, James, if you write songs about climate change, war, social injustice, and even the Christian Science movement, people will call you political. And you wanting to reject being political is in itself political. I'm not one to say all art is political. I mean, I'll be hard-pressed to find the Marxist undertones in Blinky Bill, but a lot of art, including much of the best art, is in some way, even if it's subtle. The comment section of this video will be very interesting.
Subscribe to the Downfall Network.
No!